Hello everyone, welcome back to Foot Forecast. In today's video, I'm going to be rebuilding Sheffield United for next season. How do they once again become at least a playoff side and hopefully get promoted to the Premier League? That's what I'm going to be discussing. And how this is going to work is I'm going to go through the Sheffield United squad, and then at the end I'm going to discuss some possible formations that would get the best out of the squad and what do they need to add in the summer. And this is going to be difficult because this will be the first season in the Championship for a while for Sheffield United without parachute payments. So they may have to consider selling some players that they wouldn't want to sell if they wanted to go back up next season. So I guess the first thing to discuss is Chris Wilder, the manager. Would I keep Wilder as Sheffield United manager? Yes, I would. I think Sheffield United needs some stability next season, and Wilder's a good manager in terms of building a squad on a low budget, so I'm definitely keeping Chris Wilder as manager, and I expect Sheffield United to do this. I don't expect them to make the same mistakes they made last summer in sacking him and replacing him with Ruben Salas, because that was the reason why Sheffield United had such a poor season. If Wilder was the manager at the start of the season, it could have been completely different for Sheffield United. So let's get into this now, and we're starting off with Michael Cooper, and I'm of course keeping Michael Cooper. He should stay as Sheffield United's, I think, number one keeper. It hasn't been his best season, but I think we've seen the past he is a quality keeper, and I think he should stay. So then we've got the backup keeper, Adam Davies. And I think this one can be quite difficult because I don't think the priority is to bring the backup keeper, but I think I would try to do this. So I'm going to put him in this tier. He is out of contract in the summer, so Sheffield United would get no fee for Davies. And then we've got Sheffield United's third choice keeper, Luke Faxon, and I would send him out on loan. He needs to play minutes in the lower leagues of England. So then we've got Sariki. I think there will be some interest potentially in Sariki in the summer, but I think Sheffield United should be able to hold on to him, so I'm going to put him in the keep, and I think Sheffield United should be looking to definitely keep Sariki at least for one more season. I think there are some still questions around him defensively and sometimes switching off, which has cost Sheffield United at points this season, but overall I think he's a good player and he's definitely a threat going forward, is Sariki. And I think those sort of defensive issues is the reason why no Premier League clubs is really going to bid high enough for Sheffield United to sell him in the summer. Then we've got Kajano Hoover, someone that came on loan in January from Wolves, and I'm not looking to make this deal permanent. He really hasn't played well for Sheffield United, which I think is disappointing because I think he looked like quite a good player to bring in on loan, but he just hasn't performed, so I think that's fair for him. And then we've got Jamie Shackleton, someone that just doesn't play nearly enough minutes for Sheffield United and he just can't stay fit. Ideally, you would look to sell him, but this could be difficult because I don't see a lot of interest in Jamie Shackleton and he's still got another year left on his contract. This is going to be a common issue for Sheffield United in this video. Then we're on to the centre halves, and the first one is Tanganga. He's definitely a player I would be keeping. I think he's good enough definitely to play for Sheffield United. Has he been at his best this season? Probably not, but I would still definitely keep him in the side. Then we've got the next one, which is Tyler Bindon. I like Tyler Bindon as a player, and I think he is good enough to get in the Sheffield United squad. The problem is that he's currently a loan, and I just can't see how Sheffield United can really make this deal permanent. I think there's bigger priorities in the summer than bringing in a player like Bindon, which will probably cost Sheffield United quite a bit. And I don't see Forest loaning Bindon to Sheffield United once again. As well as this, if Forest go down, then they'll probably start Tyler Bindon in the Championship, or he'll at least be part of the squad. So for this reason, I'm going to put him in the bottom tier. Then we've got Ben Mee. I felt like this was a decent signing, someone that could come in his experience at the start of the season, but he hasn't been at his best, has Ben Mee. So for this reason, I'm going to put him in the bottom tier. I think he's out of contract in the summer, so that should be fine. Then we've got Mark McGuinness. This has been a bit of a problem for Sheffield United, the signing of Mark McGuinness. because he hasn't been at the level that Sheffield United will be looking for, considering they gave him a 4-year deal. So the problem is now, what do you do with a player like McGuinness? Because it can be hard to sell him because he's probably on a decent wage. So I think you're probably going to have to keep McGuinness. I don't think this is the end of the world. I think he'd be a decent third or fourth choice centre half. But if you could sell him, I would. So then we're on to Harrison Burrows at left back. Hasn't been his best season, but you definitely still keep him because he is a quality player. And I would also be keeping Sam McCallum as the backup left back. And he could potentially challenge Harrison Burrows for the starting spot, as he's done this season. Then we've got Leo Hidgdor, who came in on loan as cover at left back, and so far we haven't really seen him, the Sunderland loanee. So for this reason, I'm going to put him in the bottom tier. I wouldn't be looking to extend that loan or potentially buy him in the summer. But that statement could be slightly different if Sheffield United play a different system, which I am going to discuss later on in the video. So then we're on to the midfield, and there's quite a few to go through, starting off with Calvin Phillips, whose loan does end at the end of the season, and he's not a player I'd be looking to make permanent. I didn't mind the loan deal, and if he turned out to be a very good player, he's a player I would have looked at a permanent deal in the future. But as usual with Calvin Phillips, he hasn't performed and he hasn't stayed fit. So I wouldn't be entertaining a deal like this again, unless it's on very good terms for Sheffield United, a very low wage, or a deal where you pay Calvin Phillips when he plays. So then we're on to the next midfielder, which is Jairo Riedewald. His contract is expiring in the summer, but you've got to extend it, and Sheffield United do have the option to do this. I would 100% be doing this, so I'm going to add him in to the midfielders for next season. He's been good when he's played for Sheffield United. Then we've got Samare, another loan deal that hasn't worked out. I wouldn't be looking to do anything with this loan, so he's going to go into the bottom tier. Then we've got City Peck, and there's a bit of a conversation to have about this player. In terms of the quality, I don't doubt the quality of the City Peck, but the question is, will a Premier League club go in for him in the summer? Well, I definitely think there is a chance. I think he's attracting quite a bit of interest from the likes of Brentford and West Ham, but I am going to put City Peck and keep. I think Sheffield United could potentially convince him to give them one more year. They may decide that it's best to let him go and then rebuild using their City Peck money, because you could get £10-15 million for City Peck. And the other reason why I put him in keep is I think there's a chance that you potentially get him back on loan. I could see a deal where Brentford, West Ham sign him and then send them back to Sheffield United for a season on loan, especially if Brentford signed him, because they do have some good depth in that midfield. But I think they should be looking to keep a player like City Peck in the club. Then we've got Tom Davies. His contract expires at the end of the season, and I'm not looking to renew it. He just can't stay fit. It's that simple. I don't think he's a bad option when he's fit, but he never is. Then we've got Arblaster, a player that hasn't had his best season, but he's still a quality option in midfield, and I'm of course keeping him. The reason why he didn't have his best season is because of that leg injury he had from the start of the season. Then we've got Alex Matos, who joined in the summer, and he's been really underwhelming, nowhere near good enough for Sheffield United. And I think I'm probably going to say a loan deal for Matos. I think it's unrealistic to sell him. I think he's got another couple of years at least on his current contract, so I'm going to put Matos in loan. He's been a really disappointing signing. Then we've got Joe Rothwell, a player that came into Sheffield United, and I think there was a bit of hope he could give Sheffield United a decent option in midfield, reinforcing it, similar to Calvin Phillips, but he's been really disappointing when he's played. He's been off the pace, but realistically, I don't think they're going to be able to sell him in the summer. He's still got a year left on his contract, and I think he's probably on a decent wage. And I can't see who would pay Joe Rothwell those sort of wages. So I'm going to have to put him in keep, and I'm going to put him as one of the midfield options. Then we're on to Callum O'Keefe, probably Sheffield United's best player this season. And of course, I'm keeping him. He won't attract any interest from any Premier League clubs, so that should be an easy keep for Sheffield United, and it's a no-brainer. Then we're on to a more difficult one to discuss, and that is Gus Hamer. He's only got 1 year left on his deal, and for that reason, I'm going to put him in sell. I think this is the player that Sheffield United should cash in on him. I think you could get maybe £7 million for a player like Gus Hamer, and that could fund the rebuild for the summer. You may need to sell another player, but he would definitely help contribute quite a bit. There's no doubt Gus Hamer's a massive talent, and if he said, I want to sign for Sheffield United again, if you give me a good contract, I think you probably do that because he's such a quality player. He's probably one of the most talented players that Sheffield United have had in the last 20 years, but I think it is time for Hamer to depart. Then we're on to the next player, another player that's attracted some interest this summer, and that is Andre Brooks, a player that's had a bit of a breakthrough season for Sheffield United. Him and Sariki down that right-hand side has been a real threat, especially in that second half of the season, and I think Sheffield United definitely needs to keep Brooks, considering he's probably the only sort of decent option that Sheffield United do have out wide. Then we're on to Ogbonne. It just hasn't worked for him at all. He hasn't been anywhere near good enough for Sheffield United. He's played some minutes in the under-21s this season, so I'm not extending that loan from Luton Town. The loan deals has been a real problem for Sheffield United this season. Then we've got Chong. This is another one where it's unlikely you're going to be able to sell Chong in the summer, because I think he's got another couple of years on his deal. I can't really see who would buy a player like Chong, so it's either keep him in the attackers for me, or maybe try loan him out, and maybe you pay some of the wages while he's out on loan, and I think that's what I'm going to do with Chong, because I think Sheffield United need better than a player like Chong. I'd actually understand if maybe you said you maybe keep him as like a third choice right winger and like a third choice attacking midfielder, but I wouldn't keep him. I'd try ship out as many of those wages as possible. Then we're on to Danny Ings, straight away into the bottom tier. Just let him go. He's out of contract in the summer. I don't have to explain that one. Patrick Bamford, I'm definitely keeping Bamford as at least one of the striker options. I like Bamford and what he offers you, but I do think you probably need an understudy to a player like Bamford. Then we've got Tom Cannon. I am selling Tom Cannon if possible. I think he'll attract a bit of interest in the summer. I simply don't think he's good enough to play for Sheffield United, and I think they need better than him. Then we've finally got Tyrese Campbell as the last attacker. This is a player where you could sell Tyrese Campbell, but I think as maybe an option up front, I would probably keep Campbell, because I think he can give you something decent up there, and he was good for Sheffield United in the previous season under Chris Wilder, and I'm basing a lot of players on their keep and sell based off those performances, because it was a lot more of a settled season where a lot of the players had a better pre-season than this pre-season they had under Ruben Salas. So I've now completed the squad for Sheffield United. What I'm going to do now is go through some different lineups we could see from Sheffield United and what sort of players they're going to need to buy to sort of complete these lineups, because as you can see, they're not fully complete. So in goal, I think Michael Cooper is definitely good enough to start. At right back, Femi Sariki. If you keep Sariki, I think he starts for Sheffield United, but I'm going to discuss another option potentially at right back. Right centre half, I think you keep Tanganga, and you need to sign a central centre half next to him. I think Tanganga could use a leader next to him despite being a captain, because I think at points this season he lacked some leadership. At left back, I've got Harrison Burrows, and then my midfield is Jairo Riedewald and City Peck. If you can keep Peck, that should be the midfield, but obviously you've got Oli Arblaster who can come in, so I think those three in midfield is very good depth for Sheffield United if they're at their best. On the right, I've got Andre Brooks. In the 10, I've got Callum O'Dea, and then off the left, I don't have a player right now. Sheffield United 100% need to buy a left winger in the summer. And up front, I've got Patrick Bamford. I think Bamford's good enough to start up front for Sheffield United, but he's definitely going to need a player that can help compete and actually play some minutes for him, because I don't think Bamford can play 90 after 90. And also, he's a player that is inconsistent, as you get with sort of championship strikers, because it's not the top level. So then my next lineup is the depth lineup. So in goal, there's no keeper right now, so Sheffield United need to sign a backup, and ideally someone that can compete with Michael Cooper. At right back, I don't have an option right now because there's no one in their squad. But a potential option is Kyle Walker. He's a player that's been linked with Sheffield United. He's obviously a massive Sheffield United fan, and I could see this happening. And Walker would probably start over Siriki, which would make you more inclined to actually sell Siriki in the summer. What Walker would offer you is more defensive stability and a more balanced side as well, because you can have Burrows and McCallum as sort of the left-hand side, the more attacking option. Then the centre-halves, I've got Mark McGuinness. He's just going to have to be a backup centre-half. And I would sign another centre-half on top of the other one that is basically going to compete with the two first-choice centre-halves of Tanganga and whoever that other one was. And then at left-back, I'm keeping Sam McCullum. I think that's fine. Then into midfield, I've got Arblaster and Rothwell. I think ideally you add another midfield option instead of Joe Rothwell, because of what we've seen so far, I'm not convinced. Then we've got the more advanced midfielder. You need a backup or someone that can compete with Callum O'Hare. And then you need to sign two wingers. This is a must for Sheffield United. I could see them only signing one more winger because they may well have to keep Chong, and they may use Chong as the backup right winger. And then up front, I've got Tyrese Campbell. I would improve on this, and I would sign a backup striker that's more likely to compete with Patrick Bamford. So those are the signings that I think Sheffield United need to make. The final system I've got here is a bit different, and that's of course because it's a three at the back. But it is realistic to potentially see this because first of all, I think the squad really suits it, and we've seen Chris Wilder use a three at the back in the past. So I think we could see a potential lineup like this. So in goal, we've got Michael Cooper. Right centre half, we've got Jaffe Tanganga. The central centre half, we don't know, and same with the left centre half. So straight away, you can see from this lineup, Sheffield United need to sign a couple of centre halves, and they would potentially have to sign three because you would need another one in the second side because McGuinness is the only cover there. So then for the two wing-backs, I've got Burrows and Siriki. I think they're perfect for both of these players. Two players that like to get forward, especially Siriki because he'd have more defensive cover. In the midfield, it stays the same as Peck and Riedewald. And in the 2-10s, left 10, Callum O'Hare, I think a very good position for him. He can sort of play a role as sort of a left midfielder, so I think a left 10's almost perfect for him. And same with Andre Brooks. He loves to cut in off that right-hand side, so a right 10 would be a perfect role for him with Siriki overlapping, basically what Sheffield United already do. And then up front, Patrick and Bamford. Now, what I also like about this lineup is you could easily see Kyle Walker sort of slotting in as the right centre-half. Maybe you move Tanganga across or to like left centre-half, which would be perfect because then you could still keep Siriki in the starting lineup. And Walker would also offer you that defensive security as a right centre-half, which is definitely good enough to do because we've seen him do it in the past for England. So that is the end of this video. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree with the keep and sell and then what Sheffield United need to add? Would you like to see a potential three at the back for Sheffield United? And would you keep Chris Wilder as manager? I definitely would. Where do I see this side potentially finishing next season? Well, right now, I think Sheffield United probably get into the playoffs, but mainly because it's extending to 8 teams. I think they probably get in as one of those 7 for 8 teams. Maybe they get in at 5 or 6, but it's going to be difficult for Sheffield United next season with no parachute payments and some of the sides that we've got coming down with the likes of Burnley and Wolves, and then one of Spurs, West Ham, Forest or Leeds. You would definitely expect them to be close to that top 2. And either way, Sheffield United need to have a really good summer and then have a good clear out first, and they need to bring in some top players because they had a terrible summer this season and it completely cost them in the league. They've got to get this right. And if you enjoy this video, go subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as liking the video.